calls for principled consistency. By this, I mean that there must be principled and consistent application of international law and principled and consistent responses to wrongdoing. The approach to this conflict should not be determined by convenience based on present circumstances, because this presents the risk of acting from expediency rather than principle. Guyana therefore appeals to this Council and to all member states to consistently adopt a principled approach to the Palestinian question as we collectively seek to advance a lasting solution. Madam President, allow me to conclude by reiterating the need to bring a definitive end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which keeps manifesting in cycles of violence that produce volumes of hurt to both sides. Let us work to achieve a ceasefire in Gaza, to bring home the remaining men, women, and children, which Hamas took hostage from Israel, and the Palestinians detained in Israeli jails without charge, and to end the aid blockade on Gaza, which is once again stifling Palestinian civilians. Guyana is prepared to do its part to this end in compliance with international law. I thank you.
And I thank the representative of Guyana for the statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of Denmark. Mr. Sharabi, thank you for your courageous testimony today. Words are not enough to express our condolences for your loss. No one should be forced to endure what you and your loved ones have gone through. I would also like to thank Assistant Secretary General Khiari for your important briefing. Denmark reiterates once again its firm condemnation of the heinous terrorist attacks on October 7 by Hamas against Israel. We re-emphasize that hostage-taking is a war crime and that the actions of Hamas pose a clear threat not only to Israel but into international peace and security. Today, we express our deepest solidarity and grief with all those affected by the hostage taken on October 7. Our thoughts are with all those that are still held in Gaza, those who came out but are traumatized for life, those who were killed in Hamas captivity, and those whose fate is still uncertain. Amongst those killed is a Danish-Israeli hostage, who we also mourn here today. We reiterate our demand for the immediate, unconditional, safe and dignified release of the remaining hostages. We also regret that the hostages have not been granted any humanitarian access to address their medical and other humanitarian needs as required under international law, including international humanitarian and human rights law. Colleagues, there's been far too much suffering since October 7th. Suffering of Israelis, in particular those brutally killed or taken hostage, as well as their loved ones. And suffering of civilian Palestinians. More than 50,000 people have lost their lives, most of whom civilians. It is time to break the cycle of violence. We deplore the breakdown of the ceasefire and the subsequent resumption of the Israeli airstrikes and renewed ground operations in Gaza, with further devastation of the civilian population. Over the past few days, there are reports of hundreds of killed. We deeply regret the death of a UNOP staff member and echo the Secretary General's condemnation of all attacks on UN personnel. We call on Israel to live up to its obligations under international law, including the resumption on unimpeded entry of humanitarian aid to Gaza, and ensure that the basic needs of the civilian populations are met. In closing, the suffering we are witnessing on all sides is immense, and the urgency to bring about peace cannot be overstated. Denmark stands firm in our call for the immediate and unconditional release of the hostages and for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, imperatives that can only be achieved through resumed negotiations. It is our hope that progress on this front will open the pathway towards a two-state solution. For the sake of those who have suffered, both those in Gaza and those such as Mr. Sharabi, and for those future generations of Israelis and Palestinians who deserve to live in peace. I resume my function as President of the Council. The representatives of the United States have asked for the floor to make a further statement.
Thank you, Madam President. I wanted to respond on behalf of the United States, having listened to some of the statements made by others around the Council, on 3 points, if I may. On humanitarian aid, getting into Gaza, I would just reiterate the position that we have articulated, that nobody wants to see Palestinian civilians in Gaza go hungry or thirsty, and that we are working tirelessly to resolve this crisis. With respect to the report issued by the Commission of Inquiry cited by some in the Council today on alleged sexual violence by the IDF, I would point out that this report conflates the acts of a few who will be reprimanded by Israel with the full-fledged sexual violence campaign orchestrated by Hamas on October 7th, and that is disgraceful. With respect to the allegation that Israel is engaging in indiscriminate strikes, the United States would remind Council members that Israel is targeting Hamas leaders and operatives who continue to use civilian infrastructure and hide among the civilian population. And the Council must condemn this practice. I thank you.
Representative of the United States for the statement. I now give the floor to the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine.
Madam President, allow me at the outset to thank Assistant Secretary General Khalid Khiari for his briefing and to convey through him our condolences and solidarity for the UN staff members killed and injured, some sustaining life-altering injuries and amputation, while they were in UN premises as a result of Israeli bombardment yesterday, and others who were killed recently from UNRWA, as Mr. Lazzarini has informed us. These victims were upholding the UN's most noble mission, trying to save lives. And as all humanitarians, they are having to do so at the peril of their lives. They were upholding the mandate conferred to them by this Council in its Resolution 2720. They are entitled to protection as Palestinian civilians are entitled to protection, and both are being blatantly deprived of it. This demonstrates yet again the indiscriminate nature of Israeli attacks. Allow me also to acknowledge the testimony of Eli Sharabi and present our condolences for his loss. Maybe no one around this table can fully grasp what such a loss means: the killing of loved ones, prolonged captivity, fear and trauma. But Palestinians, us, can. We understand this pain because we live it. They endure it every day. Entire families obliterated in massive and indiscriminate bombardments. Children shot by Israeli snipers in the head and in the chest. Communities uprooted by force. There is not a single Palestinian family that does not have a loved one killed, wounded, detained, or displaced. And they have been enduring these horrors and injustices for decades, even though they reached an unprecedented scale in the last year and a half. When confronted with such loss, either we pursue justice or vengeance. Justice ends suffering. Vengeance perpetuated. Madam President, we will not accept incitement against Palestinian civilians. We will not accept excuses for their killing and maiming and torture. We will not accept justification for collective punishment. We saw Israelis calling for and cheering on genocide We saw Israelis signing bombs to be dropped on the heads of Palestinian families. We saw Israelis block humanitarian aid to a starving population. We saw Israelis attack innocent Palestinians. But we do not attribute these acts generically to Israeli civilians, nor do we use these actions as justification for indiscriminate killing and maiming and for dehumanizing and punishing millions of people. We have a right to life too, a right to liberty and dignity, a right to live in peace in our ancestral land. Till when will our people have to suffer from the inability to see Palestinians as equals, to acknowledge their suffering and their loss, to remember that around 1 million Palestinians have experienced captivity, that many died while in Israeli jails, killed or left to die? Not a single Palestinian family did not have a Palestinian that visited Israeli jails. Not a single Palestinian family. Israel arrests our children, our doctors, our teachers, our workers, family members, bystanders, parliamentarians, academics, human rights defenders. Israel considers all Palestinians guilty. All Palestinians guilty. Till when will people pretend they do not see the images of Palestinians coming out of Israeli captivity looking like ghosts? Starved and traumatized, beaten and some raped. Till when Israel will pretend it bears no responsibility in the crimes it commits? Till when our humanity and our rights will be denied? We have to note that usually the ones who suffered most on both sides have been among the most passionate advocates for a ceasefire for over a year now. Those who suffer the most, they have solidarity with each other. Their calls should be heeded, as many of you referred to another victim that gave testimony to us, and she asked for the ceasefire to be defended and the 3 stages of the agreement to be implemented. Listen to her. Their calls should be heeded. Their suffering should not be used to inflict more death and devastation or as an excuse for perpetual war, genocide, forced displacement and annexation, dehumanization and hate. The suffering of all civilians must end. All civilians. We have a duty to end the occupation and conflict and to ensure life prevails, to ensure liberty prevails, to ensure shared peace and security prevail, if we truly care about the victims and about our peoples. Madam President, in 42 days, many more hostages were released than in 15 months of indiscriminate bombardments. If Netanyahu truly cared about the hostages, he would not have shattered the ceasefire that was allowing for their release. If anyone needed more evidence that Netanyahu could care less about the fate of the hostages, his decision to resume attacks against Gaza is the ultimate proof. All Israel had to do was move forward in implementing the ceasefire. Everyone knows this truth, starting with the families of the hostages themselves, who are still demonstrating to stop the bloodshed and restore the ceasefire. Killing innocent Palestinian civilians by the hundreds each day, forcibly displacing our population with the clear aim of annexing our land and ending our national identity has nothing to do with hostages or security. It has everything to do with the attempt to destroy the Palestinian people as the means to seize their land. Madam President, the Israeli Minister of War addressed what he called the residents of Gaza, saying, and I quote, "Soon the evacuation of the population from combat zones will resume, and what follows will be far more severe. You will pay the full price, return the hostages and remove Hamas. The alternative is total devastation." End of quotation. After having confessed to weaponizing humanitarian aid, Israel is also confessing to its policy of collective punishment, indiscriminate attacks, and of wanton destruction and devastation. The Israeli government cannot speak of humanity nor denounce barbarism, not when it kills 400 Palestinians in one night, including over 150 children, representing one of the largest single-day child death toll in the last year. Not when it killed 50,000 Palestinians, maimed over 100,000 Palestinians, and destroyed the lives of 2 million people. Not when it is starving our people. Not when it is forcibly displacing them. Not when it is abducting thousands and subjugating them to torture and beating and degrading treatment and sexual violence. Not when it is detaining the corpses of hundreds of Palestinians, denying their families the right to provide their loved ones dignified burial. Israel considered it is barbarism only if it attributes to the act of Hamas, but it is justified if it is committed by Israel. It is barbarism if the act is against an Israeli, and it is legitimate if the act is against a Palestinian. Look at this, despicable, double standard. Israel has a right to kill and maim, to arbitrarily detain and torture, to displace and destroy and devastate, and we have the right to die and disappear. That is not how international law works. There are prohibited actions regardless of the identity of the perpetrators and regardless of the identity of the victims. There are protections afforded to all civilians regardless of the nationality, religion, and race. These prohibitions and protections must be upheld. Madam President, civilians should not be harmed. Civilians should not be harmed. They should not fear being killed in their houses or abducted from their homes. Families should not be torn apart. They should be reunited in life, not in death. Reunited in life, not in death. We have been pushing for a ceasefire that guarantees this aim, while Israel continues advocating for more killing and more destruction. There is no military solution to this conflict. You cannot kill your way to a solution. You cannot negate the millions of Palestinians. We are rooted as olive trees deep in our land. You cannot kill all of us. Again, there is no military solution to this conflict, and you cannot kill your way to a solution. The Israeli government is trying to convince its people that killing, dispossession, and displacing Palestinians is the only way forward, while we have, even in the midst of this genocide, continued to plead for achieving our freedom through peaceful means. Our president from this chamber said, I am ready to negotiate and to talk peace. And for those who said Ramallah is so close to Jerusalem, he is ready in Jerusalem and in Ramallah and everywhere to talk peace for those who are ready and willing to talk peace. Palestinians is the only way forward, while we have, even in the midst, as I said, of this genocide, continued to plead for achieving our freedom through peaceful means, for respect for international law, for two states living side by side, as many of you state very often, for shared peace and security. It is for every government around the world to choose now the vision they will rally behind and to use all means available to them to see it prevails. Both sidism and balancing acts will not cut it. You have to decide. You cannot play both ways. The fate of millions of people cannot be left to the decisions of this Israeli government that caters far more to the political survival of Netanyahu than the survival of hostages, that wants to get rid of the Palestinian people and steal Palestinian land, that wants to render occupation permanent and peace impossible. The ceasefire is a test. Failing at it means only prolonging the agony and suffering caused by today's horrors, but setting the stage for horrors to come. It is a test we cannot afford to fail. We have to defeat this option. Peace is the only option available to us, to them, and to all of you. Help us to move in the direction of peace and away from the direction of killing and war. And I thank you very much, Madam President.
I thank the permanent observer of the Observer State of Palestine for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to Assistant Secretary General Chiari for your briefing today. I would like to thank the United States, the UK, and France for calling this important session. Before I begin, I want to thank Eli Sharabi for his courage today. Eli, there are no words that can begin to describe the strength it takes to be here after everything you have endured. None of us can truly comprehend the pain, the suffering, the loss you have endured. The torment of 491 days in captivity, the terror of returning to a home that no longer exists, the weight of knowing that your entire world was taken from you. Yet, despite all of this, you sit here today, not for yourself, but for those who remain behind. For over 530 days, 59 innocent men, women, and children have been trapped in Hamas captivity. Many of them are barely holding on to life. Unfortunately, some of them have been murdered, and Hamas has not let the world see a single one of them. These are innocent people being tortured for the crime of being Israelis or being in Israel. They are starving in the dark, alone, afraid, suffering beyond what words can capture. They are denied food, water, and medicine. They are beaten, tortured, and humiliated. They are being held in conditions so inhuman, so depraved, that the hostages who were freed can barely describe what they endured. The cruelty here is not just from Hamas. it is also from the silence of the world. Eli Sharabi testified before you today and laid bare the horrors of his captivity. He described the torment he endured and spoke for the other hostages still in Hamas's hands. Now the question that demands an answer is this: where is the world? Where is your outrage? Where is the international outcry for their release? Where is the demand from every nation to bring them home? Since October 7th, you have passed 77 resolutions in this chamber. There has not been a single resolution condemning Hamas. Meanwhile, there are those in this chamber who refuse to even mention the hostages. Algeria, you have spent months in this room condemning, accusing, and criticizing Israel. But when a human being sits before you today, after enduring the worst of humanity at the hand of those you defend, you could barely acknowledge his presence. You couldn't find the decency to even say his name. That is outrageous. And the world can see it. For 530 days, you have erased the hostages. You have spoken about Gaza without mentioning the crimes of Hamas. You have debated humanitarian assistance without acknowledging the humanitarian crimes Hamas is deliberately inflicting on the hostages. You have had the audacity to talk about a ceasefire without demanding that those held in Hamas's terror tunnels be freed. How can you claim to stand for international law while ignoring the hostages? How can you speak of human rights when you refuse to recognize the most horrific human rights abuse in this war? How can you sit in this chamber, look Eli Sharabi in the eye, and say nothing? The massive amounts of humanitarian aid that Israel has facilitated, coordinated, and allowed into Gaza have reached every segment of the population, except one: the hostages. While Gazan civilians benefit from food, medicine, shelter, and support, these innocent individuals languish in conditions that defy human comprehension. Those hostages have not seen an ounce of that aid. Think how many trucks, how many containers. We listened to you, Eli, that you got a quarter of a pita a day. There are so many on this council, you, who never fail to scream for more aid, more trucks, more shipments, more access, yet you have never once demanded that a single piece of that aid be delivered to our hostages. Not a single word has been spoken. Not a single demand has been made. Not a single resolution has been passed insisting that those in the most desperate need of humanitarian assistance actually receive it. The UN's inaction on the plight of the hostages is a moral collapse of the highest order. To be clear, it's not just this council that has failed. The entire UN system has forsaken its responsibility. So many agencies that claim to be the protectors of humanity have abandoned the hostages entirely. Where was the Security Council? The General Assembly? OCHA? UNICEF? The so-called Human Rights Council? The Red Cross? The Red Cross has not conducted one visit, one inspection. We heard the absurd equation you made about the detainees in Israel. They have 3 meals a day, they have medical treatment, they have visitations of the Red Cross. Before the war, they had visitations of families. How can you compare it? The Red Cross had no one inspection or spent one moment with the hostages in Gaza. And yet, for 530 days, the Red Cross has continued to act according to Hamas's playbook. Colleagues, there is one absolute certainty in this situation. The war will not end until the hostages are freed. Israel did not choose this war. Hamas did. It was Hamas that invaded Israel and Eli's home. It was Hamas that slaughtered our people, and for 3 months it was Hamas who stalled negotiations. Hamas was given the chance to extend the ceasefire. Hamas was given the opportunity to bring relief to the people of Gaza. Hamas was given a choice, and they chose war. Therefore, Israel has resumed its military operations against Hamas with increasing force. The IDF is striking Hamas terror targets throughout the Gaza Strip. Terrorist infrastructure, weapons stockpiles, and command centers are being dismantled. This will continue. This will continue until every last hostage is home. This war does not end with hostages left underground. This war does not end until Hamas is defeated. The choice is simple. If you want a ceasefire, then pressure Hamas to release the hostages immediately. Madam President, Eli Sharabi should not have to be here today. He should have never been taken. He should have never been starved, chained, and brutalized. He should have never lost his wife, his daughters, his brother. And yet, here he is, a survivor of the worst of humanity, asking the world to save those still trapped in that nightmare. I ask you to take a moment and reflect as we speak here today. There are 59 Eli Sharabis underground, desperate for freedom. Imagine their faces. Imagine their screams and their cries. Imagine what they would say to you today. Will you listen or will you look away? Because this moment will not be forgotten. There is no neutrality here. There is no middle ground. There is only right or wrong. We will never stop fighting for the hostages. We will never abandon them. We will never sit idly by as terrorists hold our people as trophies. We will bring them home, all of them. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of Israel for the statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.
The status of the UNFPA. Is it true that the whole office here in New York is being moved